But Brandon, let's move on into our final topic. And what we're looking at today is kind of what we looked at. Oh, what was that, a month ago? Was it a month ago that we looked at Ayton and Bagley and kind of went 1v1? And then everyone was like, what about Mo Bamba? So, I mean, we'll have to talk about Mo Bamba later. But we're doing a kind of another versus video for the NBA draft. We're going to look at two of the top point guards in this draft right now. We're going to look at the freshman from Oklahoma, Trae Young. I don't know if you guys have heard of him lately. And then we're also going to look at the freshman from Alabama, Collin Sexton. And how we're going to do this is we're going to look at one first, we're going to look at the other one second, kind of compare them at the end, and then finally we will end the video end the segment making our comparison for our decision, I should say, of who we would pick if we had to choose one over the other on the clock draft style. And we flipped the coin before we started recording, and Trae Young won. So, Brandon, we're going to start with Trae Young. What do you like? What do you don't like? Start it off, Trae Young. What do you think?
Well, Trae Young, he has scored a lot of points. We know that. We know that he averages a lot of points, but I think it's really interesting that when you look at some of the games where he scored a lot of points, they have not won. And part of that is because I think at some points he's shooting too many low quality, low percentage shots. They're not going in. He's putting them up, they're not going in. But he's getting so many points because he's shooting so many shots. A shooter's going to shoot, and eventually they're going to score.
That's what I was just going to say. Shooter's going to shoot, man. But you can't put a cap on that. Kobe didn't.
No, but you don't. You want to shoot high percentage, high quality shots. That's what you want Trae Young to be doing. And I understand that. Again, a shooter is going to just shoot the ball. How do you get? How do you stop being cold? You keep shooting until you start making them again. I get it, but that would be a criticism. That would be a criticism of Trae Young. However, Trae Young, he's not just a good shooter. We talked about this before we came on the podcast today. He's not just a good shooter. He's incredibly talented with the basketball in terms of driving, in terms of dishing it off. Let's look at the Alabama game. I know they lost that game 80-73, but that's the game where where people really were getting excited because you were able to look at Trae Young for Oklahoma and Collin Sexton for Alabama.
It's a sexy matchup.
The two guys that people believe are going to be the two best guards in the upcoming NBA draft. And I would have to agree with them. There were so many times where Trae Young had some beautiful assists, some beautiful dishes to his teammates. He had 8 assists in the ball game. That's something that you see a lot of times from Trae Young. It's not just the points. It's, 20-some points and 14 assists. The guy does a lot outside of just shooting the basketball. That's something that you want to see in a good guard, especially when it gets to the NBA and you're able to do a whole lot more than just be a shooter. You're able to be a playmaker, and that's what you want to be able to have as well. Trae Young is also pretty good with his foot mechanics. He's very good. When he gets the basketball, he's always lined up towards the hoop. That's one of the most positive things about him. He's always ready to shoot, to score, to drive. He's ready to go do that. So his mechanics there are really good. He also knows how to create some space for himself. It's going to be one of those things where he can get better at it, especially when you're going up against NBA defenders and it's not college defenders anymore. But he's really good at kind of the step back, the drive-in step back, create that space between him and the defender, be able to take his shot from 3.
Having the quick release he has also helped.
Exactly.
Just a whoop.
Very true. You're right with that. There's a lot of really positive things from Trae Young. Again, like I had mentioned kind of early on, there's some things that he could get better at, but this is a really good player, one that I would want on my team.
Well, and that's the thing. The thing I was thinking about watching some film of Trae Young, just kind of refreshing myself on some of the games that we have watched earlier this year. Do you remember when we talked about Trae Young, first ever draft topic we did this season, where we asked, could he be the #1 pick? And what was one comparison? I looked at the camera and told people, don't make that comparison.
Steph Curry.
Steph Curry. I am today on, what was this, February 12th, saying that it is okay to say that he has a little bit of Steph in him. And the reason why he has, like, when I was watching him, like, you know what? He has a little bit of Steph in him, but he's not Steph Curry, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Like, the quick release, the shooting from the parking lot and making it, I could see Steph Curry doing that. The assists numbers of basically, I'm going to get my teammates open, I can see a little bit of Steph there too. More so the shooting, though, with Steph. When it comes to the passing, that's when people start comparing him to, oh, shoot, I had the name and I just, Steve Nash is who they start comparing him to. I'm like, I had the name and I just lost it. The things I don't like with Trae Young is the first one is his turnovers. Turns the ball over too many times. Yeah. I want to say he's averaging, 5 turnovers a game right now, which is, to me, way too high. Yeah, 5.3 turnovers per game all season, according to ESPN.
I was going to say 7.
7? Still, 5, 7, whatever it is, not good. That's way too many turnovers. The other thing that, to me, is not that good is his foul shooting percentage. He's right now at 84.3, and a lot of people will go, I'll take that. Not Ricky Widmer. 90 or above. 90 and above is what I'm shooting for. And the reason why I don't like it...
Yeah, 5.3, you're right.
The reason why I don't like it with Trae Young is because, like, you might see on some draft profiles where they go, oh, his foul shooting is a strength. To me, I look at it, the amount he gets to the line is good. He's averaging about 9.3 attempts this season from the foul line per game. However, there were a lot of times in his highlight reel and in games I look at it and I go, should have made it, should have made it. And a guy like Trae Young, if you can make it from the parking lot with a defender in your face, you can make it from the foul line with nobody in your face. And that's why I get that everyone's not going to make every single free throw, but with the kind of shooter that he is, I look at that and go, there's no reason why you should be under 90% with how much you get to the line. Like, he's missing an average of almost 2 foul shots a game, which turns out to about, if we're rounding, about 7 for 9 every game from the foul line. And yet again, people might say, okay, that's good. Not I. You got to go and make more of those. Maybe 8 for 9, 9 for 9 is what we're shooting for. Of course, perfection is what we are shooting for. But those are kind of the two bugaboos with me, with Trae Young. Is he going to come in and be exactly Steph Curry? No. He's going to be a shooter. I love the assists that he has, averaging, over 10 assists a game, almost 10 assists. He's at 9.4 on the season right now. The one thing he doesn't have that Steph Curry has is, do you remember in the NBA Finals, Brandon, when it was all over Twitter, all over SportsCenter, when Steph Curry kind of dribbled in and dribbled out and kind of faked LeBron out of his shoes and then drove right in for the layup? Trae Young's not going to do that. Trae Young's not going to dribble and have all these like little fancy dribble work. Yes, he can drive in. Yes, he can lay it up. But to me, he's not the quickest out there. He's more of a shooter. And when he drives, I'm going to kick. And he's got amazing vision of knowing where his players are. There was one I was watching. He wasn't even moving. He was just kind of standing there, waited for the defense to shift, and threw it from the left side, like left of the key by the 3-point line, or by the 3-point arc, and whipped it all the way to the right corner, found his guy, and his guy made the wide open 3. So that's what you're getting with Trae Young. You're getting a shooter who has great court vision and can hit guys for buckets and rack up assists as well.
However, Trae Young, one thing I do want to bring up, looking at his last 3 games, and it's been 3 losses for Oklahoma. As we talked in the last segment, Oklahoma's been a team that has really been struggling 2-6 in their last 8. In the game on the road at Texas, he went 7 of 22 from the field, 2 of 14 from 3. Miserable. Against West Virginia in a loss, 10 of 20 from the field, 4 of 10 from 3. Better. but in their loss on the road at Iowa State just recently, 7 of 21 from the field, 1 of 8 from 3. He has been struggling from beyond the arc, which has really hurt the team overall. So it's one of those where he's had some really, really good games, many good games this season. But when he's off, he's off.
And that's the reason why when it comes to Trae Young and both of these, I feel like both of these guys could fall into this, but Trae Young falls into it more. If you're drafting Trae Young to be the guy, to basically be, and I'm going to throw this out there and people are going to get mad, but see where I'm coming from here. If you're drafting him to be the LeBron James of your team, the Kyrie Irving of your team, the, let's say when he was in Oklahoma City, the Kevin Durant of your team, although he still had Westbrook there. If you're drafting him to be even the Jimmy Butler of your team, the guy, you're probably not going to do well if he is the only guy. And this is where that Steph comparison can creep back in a little bit, because if you surround him with the right players and he ends up in a situation like Steph did in Golden State, where I'm not expecting him to because of how many teams can draft like the Warriors, but they, like, you look at what Steph has. He's got Klay Thompson out there that can take some pressure off. Now they have Kevin Durant, but even before, for that first one, a Draymond Green that was drafted. If you're filling him with the right guys, he can be successful. But if he has to shoulder the load, like there was, I'm even going to throw the Oklahoma State game, 8 for 20. Yeah, he shot 40% from 3, but he jacked up 20 shots. What about the TCU win in overtime? 10 for 18. Yeah, he made 55% of his threes, but he took 18 of them. And that's the little problem with the 3 of, yeah, you can say, oh, he's a volume shooter, but if you surround him with the right talent, then he doesn't have to shoot as many threes and fall into the category of what you were talking of, where it's like most of these threes that you're throwing up in those 20, were all 20 of those quality shots? Were all 20 of those the best possible shot you could have made? And that's what he could fall into. Any final thoughts before we kind of change over into Collin Sexton?
My final thought with Trae Young is the fact that in that Alabama game too, that was, again, a loss. They played really good defense against him. They actually changed their defense up like 6-7 times against him. And I think, as much as he'll say, and he has said, you know, I see different defenses all the time. You know, I'm used to that. He struggled. They did a pretty good job of locking him down. So what is he going to do to be better than that and not have to completely rely on just being the shooter from 3? What else can he do? Yes, I know that he can, you know, assist guy. How can he score outside of being that shooter from 3?
Well, and that's kind of reminded me of one thing that I just want to throw out before we go to Collin Sexton is we're going to see it more and more as we go through the end of this season in the conference tournament. When you have been on fire, like Trae Young has been most of this time, teams are going to do, and Iowa State kind of did it, where they said, you know what? We'll lock you down. We will lock you down. He only had 3 points. 3 points with about 4.5 to go in that first half. Yeah, he finished with 7 in that half to avoid his lowest score for a first half performance. But most teams are going to go and say, we're going to lock you down.
And they're gonna face guard him.
We're going to limit you and force the rest of your team to beat us. That's why I'm saying, look at the NBA side. If you have other players around him that can, like, I'm going to the Warriors because they're the gold standard of, like, you have Klay Thompson, you have Draymond Green, they add Kevin Durant, then it won't be a problem for Trae Young because they won't be able to say, I'm going to lock you down and see what the rest of the team's going to do. Moving on to Collin Sexton, though, what do you think about him?
Collin Sexton, I like him. Being able to get...
He's quick. He is quick.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. No one's going to beat that guy in transition. But Collin Sexton, I didn't really know him as well. When we first sat down and we first talked about Trae Young, and people were saying, well, there's a Collin Sexton guy over here too from Alabama.
Yeah.
He hadn't really come onto the scene yet. Not at least for me, but Collin Sexton. I want to start off by saying that this guy, he embraces contact. He almost welcomes contact out there on the floor, which is a huge thing. He's really good defensively. He's pretty darn tough defensively, and he's pretty locked down when it comes to defense. Lightning quick speed. That was one of the things I really wanted to talk about. Lightning quick speed, whether it's when it's an offensive possession for Alabama and he's just zooming to the hoop, or it's he gets the basketball off of a rebound and beats 3 defenders down the floor. He is lightning quick, and he will beat anyone down the floor. Also a strong court awareness. He knows where he needs to be on the floor. He knows how to kind of get the ball moving, because he knows not only where he is, but where his other offensive pieces and teammates are. He finishes extremely well at the hoop and at the rim. That's another thing that I really like. His size is perfect. I think that when you look at size, NBA teams may look at Collin Sexton and say, Collin Sexton, with his size, with his build, with his physique, he has more NBA ready skills in terms of all of that, kind of the intangibles, like that. They may like him more because of that. He's a guy that probably, when you look at the NBA, they're going to say, if you gave him Trae Young, Collin Sexton just to look at him, they'd go, Collin. Because of just, when you look, that he looks like more of an NBA ready guy.
Well, and the thing that I kind of wanted to, and I'm glad you said that, because the thing I was kind of thinking before we started the segment, as I was doing some research today on both Sexton and Young. You know what these two kind of, like, the comparisons that we're making between Young and Sexton, you know what it reminds me of? Like, not exactly, but kind of, where I can kind of fit the same mold over it. It's like I'm going back to last year and we're talking about Lonzo Ball versus DeAndre Fox. Because you think of the two, Collin Sexton in this case is De'Aaron Fox. I call him DeAndre. De'Aaron Fox type player, where, you know what, I'm going to be a driver first, get to the lane, embrace that contact. Whereas Trae Young, Lonzo Ball, now I know Trae Young's shot looks a lot better than Lonzo's does, but yeah, he can shoot from 3. He's a facilitator. Yeah, he can drive sometimes, but really he's going to be a 3-ball guy and a facilitator. That is what I could not help going back to each time, where, yes, they're not exactly the same, but it's kind of like that same debate of, what do you want, a guy who's going to shoot 3s and have higher assist numbers, or a guy who's going to be more athletic and can drive to the lane? And yet again, to no surprise, this year when Sexton and Young went head-to-head, who won that matchup?
Sexton.
Last year when De'Aaron Fox and Lonzo Ball went head-to-head, who won that matchup?
Don't know.
De'Aaron Fox.
Don't remember.
It was in the tournament. They met in the tournament, and everyone was, because I remember it like it was yesterday. Sean I think Dave.
I'll be straight up honest with you. I don't remember talking about these two the way that we talked about.
Yeah.
I don't remember talking about Lonzo Ball and De'Aaron Fox the way that we talked about these two.
Well, that's because we rebranded everything. Last year was on the fast break that Sean and I had that discussion.
Well, then you can't bring it up like, remember when we talked about it, because we didn't.
But I mean, like, we as MVP, like, because I was in that discussion. That's what it reminds me of, though. And the thing that I look to is, like, I'm watching Collin Sexton play, and the thing I'm thinking of is, like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to make this comparison, but you want to know what NBA pro popped into my head? And I'm asking you this because I prepped you for this, because I asked you this as soon as we walked in the door today. What pro?
What
when it comes to Collin Sexton, what pro?
Because I guessed it right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one
it's
popped
Russell
in my head?
Westbrook.
Russell Westbrook. It wasn't just the fact that they're similar height, and I believe right now that Russ is about 10 pounds. I know Russ has an NBA body, but about 10 pounds more right now than Collin Sexton is. He's about 200, where Sexton's about 190 according to ESPN. But I'm just, and for this, take it as it may. There are people that are going to argue with this, but for the stats I'm going to throw out there for Westbrook, I'm excluding the last 3 years. The reason why I'm excluding those 3 is I think we can all agree that the last 3 years, maybe even the last 2, Russ has kind of been putting up a lot more stats because he's playing pissed off. He's been playing pissed off ever since his buddy KD went over to the Warriors, but in excluding the last 3, ever since he started racking up those assist numbers, the numbers are kind of similar, where it's like, yeah, Russ in the NBA is getting more points than Sexton right now, but I'm looking at it and like the only thing that Russ does better is he racks up about 5 more points per game at the next level, and he's got about 4 more assists in the NBA. But I look at the career shooting, and it's free throws when it comes to 3-pointers, and when it comes to field goal by like .001, Collin Sexton is better than the career averages for Russell Westbrook. And I know what people are going to say, Ricky, it's career averages. You can't really do that. But I look at it and I go, that could be how I look at it is there are 2 guys to me I can compare Collin Sexton to. And if I'm going young, I'd say De'Aaron Fox type player. If I'm saying at his highest potential of what he can maybe become, if he can develop more passing, because between the, maybe it's because we're comparing the 2, the thing that kind of looked like a negative to me when we're putting it next to Trae Young is the assist numbers, to where I'm like, you can't have about 5 a game. You can't have about 5 assists a game compared to about 3.4. And part of that could also be the fact of like, is it all me? Is it all me on this? Because like you look at the Tennessee game, he had 4 assists. You look at the Florida game, he had 6 assists. But then Missouri and Oklahoma, he only had 2 assists. So to me, that's the one thing that I would work on if I was Collin Sexton, where it's like, hey, you know what? You can drive, but you don't have to shoot all the time. You don't have to be the guy to put it in the hoop every time. Let's get the best basket. And that's why I would go ahead and work on the assist game a little more if I was Collin Sexton. I like the points that he gives up, although I expect him to, at the height of his development, I expect him to score a lot more points at the next level. He's not as great shooting from 3 as Trae Young is, but
I think it's not the fact. I want to jump in there and say it's not the fact that he's not as good. That's not his game.
No,
as much.
It's not.
I mean, I'm trying to look at the most threes that he's taken this season. The most I think is 7.
And he went 0 for 7
in a game. He
went
0
for 7 against Mississippi State, but he went 3 for 7 against Mizzou. And I get it. I'm not trying to say that's his game, but like I look at 33.7 and I go, maybe let's work on that to up that up a little bit, at least get to the, like at the least, let's get to maybe 35. 40 would be golden for 3 points, but he's going to be a guy that's a driver, that's what you're going to do. That's why I would work at the assist numbers, because what I would like to do at the next level is have you be a guy like Russell Westbrook has been doing, where it's like, I'm going to drive in, everyone's going to collapse on me, I'm going to just kick it out to a guy who's open for 3. And that's the one thing, the main thing that I think Sexton will have to work on at the next level is the assist numbers.
I think you're right. I think that's a good thing to bring up, because that's one piece that I believe that Trae Young is better at. I mean, you take a look at the game that they played against each other, and 8 assists for Trae Young, 2 assists for Collin Sexton. So you see that Trae Young does that a little bit better, a little bit more often than Sexton does. So it's a good point to bring up. But you also look that, and I'm just going off the matchup because it's an easy one to kind of look at. Young went 6 of 17 shooting, 4 of 9 from 3, while Sexton went 8 of 14 shooting, 1 of 4 from 3. So similar. Sexton shot less and was, I think, a little bit more efficient than Trae Young was. But again, Trae Young has put up some huge shot totals, some huge shot totals. And then again, when you go through and you look at how many shots Collin Sexton has put up this season, the most he's put up in one game, 22. It was against Minnesota. He went 12 of 22. That's the game he had 40.
Here's the thing I'm going to ask you, and this is what's going to close out the podcast for us. I'm throwing it to you first. You're an NBA GM, whatever team you want, like whatever team name you want, because you're a new team and you're in the draft. You're looking for a point guard. That's the one you're going with. You're on the clock. Trae Young is available. Collin Sexton's available. The clock is starting now. Who do you go with?
Well, if I'm a new team, from the team that I was before when we did this earlier in the season, I can switch and say that I'm going to go Collin Sexton.
Why?
The reason why I'd go Collin Sexton is because I think that he brings a little bit more of a consistent, you know what you're going to get out of him type of deal. Whereas with Trae Young could come out and he could go 7 of 14 shooting and go 4 of 6 from 3, or he could come out and go 8 of 29 shooting and 1 of 11 from 3. Whereas Collin Sexton, I don't think there's as much of a, I guess, a gap there, or as much of a, oh, what are we going to get? It's more, you know what you're going to get each and every night for the most part. I also like his build, his speed. I like that from Collin Sexton. He's more of an NBA-ready talent, and that's what you're working towards. Because what do we say, and what do I say a lot of the times, Ricky? Good college player, but we lose him in the NBA, or they just don't make it.
I am going to go on the opposite side of you. If I am on the clock, both are available, I need a point guard, I'm going with Trae Young. And the reason why I'm going with Trae Young is, and this is more of my philosophy as if I would be a GM or a coach, and this kind of fits into what I've even said last year when I know we didn't do De'Aaron Fox in the fast break, but when Sean asked me, all right, Ricky, you're on the clock, who do you go with number 1, Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball? I said Lonzo Ball, and right now I'm looking pretty smart for that because Markelle Fultz hasn't played that much. However, same thing here. I would go Trae Young based on the fact of, not because of the highlight reel, not because of, oh, he scored 40-some points against this team and 40-some against that team. I like the fact that in today's NBA, you need to be able to shoot the 3 ball, and you need to have a guy who can assist, whatever that is. Whether you're Cleveland, that's LeBron, who's going to throw around the assists, or whether it's your Golden State and Steph Curry is going to be the guy to shoot threes and assist. I love the court vision that he has. I love the range that he has, and it would be then my job to put the best team around him so that he doesn't have to go ahead and do it each and every night. Going back to our old discussion, do I think he's going to be the number 1 pick? I don't think so. However, I could see him being kind of like a Steph Curry where, hey, I'm 7th, I'm at the bottom of that top 10, and then I come to the NBA and I just work my tail off and become a good pro. But I would go with Trae Young because to me, he fits what the NBA is more than a Collin Sexton, where the 3-ball rules right now in the NBA.
But do you think that Trae Young's going to be allowed to put up that many shots in the NBA? 39 shots. I know that he doesn't do it every time, but 39 shots, go 14 of 39. Yeah, you got a lot of points, but you also, turned the ball over this many times, and we lost.
Well, and that's the big thing where, and like I said, the number one for each guy, assists for Collin Sexton, turnovers for Trae Young. You can't be giving the ball up 5 times a game and giving that many chances to the other team. And I don't think that in the NBA he's going to be jacking up as many threes. I believe with Trae Young, it comes down to, is he going to be matched up with the right coach that can work with him, to the fact of, hey, you know what? Maybe let's not jack up 23s. Let's find the best threes for you, but use that court vision to find guys who are open and making the confidence. Because like I'm looking right now at, of course I'm going to do it because everyone's comparing it to him, and I've said enough. Like Steph Curry averages, this year he's averaging 10 threes a game. He's averaging 10 threes a game and making about 4.2 threes per game this year. The last 2 years he's averaged that much, and that's with KD on the team. Overall, he's averaged about 7.8 attempts per game in the NBA, 3.4 on average, and he's making about 43.6% of his threes. So, I mean, there's, and I'm going to use that P word, potential for Trae Young to fit what this NBA is. However, this is another one, like Ayton and Bagley. Just because you pick one or the other doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. However, in that conversation, I will throw out that Sean is a firm believer that me and him were talking, I believe, with Dave, and he was like, you know what, if there's one player in this draft that could be a bust, it'd be Marvin Bagley. In this situation, Young or Sexton, I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong answer. It comes down to what type of player would you want? Would you want an athletic scorer, or would you want a guy who can shoot from range and have crazy ball court vision to get his teammates the ball?
One of my final points I want to bring up, and I do I like Trae Young. I like him a lot. I think he's a fun player to watch. But in his last 9 games, and remember, Oklahoma's 2-6 in their last 8. In his last 9 games, he's averaged close to 8 turnovers per game. You can't do that. That's a big reason why Oklahoma has struggled. And again, in the NBA, teams don't want that. Teams don't want, they can't have that many turnovers a game. You can bring a lot of points, but when you're giving the ball away just as much, that's not helpful. And that's why that is very worrisome if that continues.
And the thing I'm going to say to that is turnover. Both of the problems that I've listed are easily fixable. Like with Sexton, all right, just, I mean, yeah, your court vision might not be like Trae Young, but hey, pass the ball a little bit more. Whereas Trae Young, it's, hey, don't try to do like with Trae Young, I think his problem is don't try to do everything yourself. Don't try to be the if de facto. We've got other players on this team that can do it too. That's why you're averaging almost 10 assists per game. Don't have to feel like, hey, you know what? I have to do this. I have to drive. I have to take the 3. Because sometimes it's like you do too much and then you give the ball away. Any final thoughts before we close the podcast?
No, I got them out.
Okay, this is where you guys come in. Let us know, what do you guys think about Trae Young? What do you guys think about Collin Sexton? And if you guys were drafting and had to take a point guard, both were on the board, who would you pick? Trae Young and Collin Sexton. Let us know why in the comments section. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. A little housekeeping here at the end. First, if you want to help support the channel, want to also become like Matthew, who we had on today for the podcast, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That link down below in the description. It helps make us and helps us do what we love to do for you guys each and every week. Number 2, if you have an Apple Podcast account, you listen on iTunes, make sure to give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating. Make sure to check the store. The link is in the description as well to get yourself an MVP t-shirt. And go ahead and bookmark mostvaluablepodcast.com. That's your one-stop shop for everything that MVP puts out each and every day. Want to thank my fans and Brandon's fans for watching on YouTube. Want to thank you guys for listening to podcast services around the world. But as always, have a good day, everybody. Yeah, they're my fans.
I like to thank my fans. Fuck you, Brandon.